So let's get right into this. This isn't just a story about a messy divorce. It's really about a fundamental clash. A war, really. It's a story of a 15-year relationship, all the love and support that goes with it, versus an actual mountain of inherited cash. And it all boils down to one huge, explosive question.
Right? Can it? This is the question at the very heart of this entire legal battle. When one person brings pretty much all the money into a relationship and the other brings the care, the home, the emotional support, how on earth does the law decide what's fair? The answer? Well, it's way more complicated than you might think, especially when the amount of money involved is just staggering.
Yep, you're seeing that right. Over 35 million Australian dollars. We're not talking about fighting over a car or a savings account here. This was a battle for a slice of an actual empire. And with stakes that high, you can bet both sides were ready for an absolute war. Okay, so let's meet the main characters in this storm. On one side, you've got Mr. Viner, the heir to this massive commercial fortune, a guy who is really grappling with the weight of his father's legacy. And on the other side, we have Ms. Balkan, his partner for a decade and a half, someone who built her entire life around him. When the relationship finally fell apart in 2017, the real battle was just getting started. And this timeline, this is exactly where the battle lines were drawn. Look, they get together in 2002, but the real game changer, the event that just casts a massive shadow over everything, is in 2005. That's when Mr. Viner's father dies, and this colossal inheritance suddenly enters the picture. But they don't actually get married until 2011, a full 6 years later. That gap, it would become a critical, brutal battleground in court. The whole legal fight really just boiled down to two completely different, totally contradictory stories about their 15 years together. Was it this long, committed partnership right from the get-go? Or was it something else, something broken? Okay, so here are the two realities. Miss Balkan, she describes this seamless union, a life they built together starting way back in 2002. She argued she was this dedicated partner, managing their homes, providing constant care, especially through his battle with cancer. A classic homemaker. But Mr. Viner, he painted a very different picture. He called it a fragmented romance, an on-again, off-again thing with tons of breakups. He claimed it only became a real committed partnership after they got married in 2011. So here's the million-dollar question, right? Or in this case, the $35 million question. With two stories this different, who do you believe? They both can't be true. One of them has to be, well, a very creative version of the past. And now a judge had the nearly impossible job of trying to reconstruct their private lives from a decade and a half of conflicting memories. And this is where we move out of the fuzzy world of he said, she said, and into the cold, hard reality of evidence. The courtroom became a stage. Lawyers started using emails, bank statements, and some really intense cross-examinations to try and piece together what really happened over those 15 years. Ms. Balkan's game plan was basically twofold. First, she had to prove her immense non-financial contribution. She had to make all her invisible work, the caregiving, the home management, visible to the court. Second, and this was crucial, she had to go on the attack. She had to convince the judge that Mr. Viner was simply not a reliable witness, that he would lie to protect his fortune. And that attack on his credibility was absolutely relentless. Her lawyers hit him with a series of sharp, pointed questions, starting with their money. Under oath, he swore they never had joint accounts. But the paper trail told a very different story. Bank documents came out that proved they had at least 3 joint accounts. That's strike one against his credibility. Then they went for a much more personal blow. They asked him, point blank, under oath, if he'd been unfaithful to her. He denied it completely. But again, evidence popped up that seemed to contradict him. Text messages were shown to the court that strongly suggested he did have an affair. Strike 2. At this point, it really looks like his credibility is just crumbling. But he had a counterattack of his own, and it was aimed right at the heart of his wife's entire case. And this was the bombshell. Mr. Viner's lawyers dug up this loan agreement between Miss Balkan and her son, who was a key witness for her. And the deal was just bizarre. It said that if his mom won a settlement over $20 million, he'd get 50% of everything above that number. All of a sudden, her son wasn't just a supportive family member. He was a witness with a massive multi-million-dollar stake in the outcome.
So now you have this impossible situation. You've got a husband who seems to have lied under oath about money and an affair. And you've got a wife whose main witness has a huge financial incentive to, shall we say, embellish his story. It's an absolute mess. The whole case rested on this paradox. Who do you trust when everyone's credibility is shot? The judge's final verdict was a twist that I promise you nobody saw coming.
Can you believe that? It's just stunning. Despite being caught in what looked like clear lies about his personal life, the judge found Mr. Viner to be the more credible witness when it came to the core issues of their relationship's history. He found Miss Balkin's memory to be poor and felt her testimony was basically tailored to win her case. He even called her son's testimony evasive and disingenuous. That one judgment call on who was more believable, it decided everything. So let's see how that decision translated into cold, hard cash. Miss Balkin argued that her 15 years of partnership were worth 38% of the fortune. Mr. Viner countered, offering just 15%. In the end, the judge landed right at 25%. I mean, it's still a huge amount of money, but it was a fraction of what she felt she had earned and deserved. And here it is. This is the core legal reason why. The judge used a very powerful word, dwarf. He didn't ignore Ms. Balkin's years of homemaking and support, not at all. But he ruled that when you're faced with an inheritance of this sheer size, the husband's initial financial contribution just overshadowed everything else. In the cold calculus of the law, where the money came from was king.
But wait, the court didn't stop there. It made something called a future needs adjustment. Basically, the judge looked at the reality of their lives moving forward. He saw that at 67 years old, with health issues and no real way to earn an income, Ms. Balkin's future was pretty shaky. Mr. Viner, on the other hand, still had a river of cash flowing in. So, to make things a little more fair, the judge tacked on an extra 2.5% to her share, purely to make sure she was taken care of in the future.
So what in the world does this epic, multi-million-dollar legal soap opera mean for the rest of us? I mean, it might feel like a story from another planet, but the principles at the heart of this fight have some really powerful practical lessons for anyone in any relationship. Let's break it down. First, promises like "I'll always take care of you" mean almost nothing in court. You can't base your financial security on trust alone. Second, the law is obsessed with where the money came from. Inherited money or money you had before the relationship carries enormous weight. 3, the hard work of homemaking and emotional support is often legally invisible. You have to fight to make it visible and prove its value. 4, and this is a tough one, credibility can be more important than morality. As we saw with Mr. Viner, the court separated the man from the witness. Being a believable storyteller in court can matter more than being a perfect person. And finally, 5, in any relationship where there's a big financial imbalance, things like prenups aren't about mistrust. They're about creating clarity for everyone, just in case. And that really leaves us with this final, really difficult question. This case ripped apart a 15-year relationship and tried to put a dollar figure on love, on care, on companionship. It's a pretty stark reminder that in the cold, hard world of the law, the scales don't always weigh emotion and money equally. And it forces all of us to ask, when it comes to a lifetime spent together, what is the true measure of value?